All right, let's dive right into a brand new stack of sources. Today we're getting granular with the latest major release from Google, Android 16. This isn't just, a lick of paint and a few bug fixes. Based on the developer blogs, official docs, and that Wikipedia overview you shared, this looks like a pretty significant step. It seems like it impacts everything from how your phone feels right in your hand to how complex apps behave under the hood.
That's right. Yeah, and our mission for this deep dive really is to be your guides through this, well, mountain of information. We'll try to cut through the technical jargon, pull out the changes that really matter, and explain why they matter to you. So whether you're just using an Android device day to day, or maybe you're one of the developers building for millions of devices, you should walk away understanding the core story of Android 16.
Okay, let's unpack this then. First things first. Android 16 is officially out. It dropped June 10th, 2025. And it comes with a code name that's, well, it's a bit of a departure, isn't it? Baklava.
Yes, Baklava. And this is actually quite interesting. For years, Android had that familiar alphabetical dessert theme, cupcake, donut, eclair. You remember. Right up to you, upside-down cake with Android 14. Baklava is a B. It totally breaks that pattern.
Right. So no cake pop or,
Yeah.
I don't know, creme brulee. What's the story behind suddenly jumping back in the alphabet?
Well, the sources seem to tie this back to Google's internal development stuff, specifically something called the Trunk Stable project. This started around Android 14, aiming to streamline how they build and release Android. So the code names became less of a public marketing thing and more tied to these internal project branches. Baklava basically signals a specific stable build from a particular development trunk. It's less about the dessert sequence now, more about the, underlying engineering.
Got it. So it reflects more of the industrialization of Android development. Makes sense. Still, Baklava is a good name. I like Baklava. So looking at the official announcements, what were the big, stated goals for Android 16? What were they trying to achieve?
They outlined several key pillars. Continuing their foundational work, they really emphasize building a more private and secure platform. That's always huge. They also aim to improve productivity, both for users and devs, enable truly beautiful apps using modern design, deliver superior media and camera experiences, and significantly enhance the intuitive user experience, with a particular focus, it seems, on making things really shine on tablets and foldables.
Okay, those are comprehensive goals. It's user experience, system health, developer tools, everything. Let's start peeling back the layers then. Maybe starting with the things users might actually see and touch the interface, the overall feel.
Right. So right on the surface, you'll see the evolution of Google's design language. Android 16 includes Material U 4.0. This builds on the dynamic theming stuff they introduced before, giving you even more granular control and personalization based on your wallpaper, your preferences.
And I thought I saw something about an even more dramatic visual update coming, maybe not right at launch.
Exactly. That's the Material 3 Expressive overhaul. It's planned for later in 2025, probably in a Q3 update. It promises a much more vibrant, more animated interface. Enhanced colors, typography, blur effects. Think of it as Material, you taking a big step towards being much more dynamic and, well, expressive, like the name says.
More personality built right into the system. I like the sound of that. What about just moving around, navigating? Any tweaks there?
Yeah, they've refined the predictive back gestures. That feature that gives you a little peek at the previous screen before you finish the swipe. It's now integrated more deeply. And crucially, it's also being extended to work with the traditional 3-button navigation layout, too, for people who still prefer that. So whichever way you navigate, you get that helpful visual cue about where you're going back to. Less guesswork.
That's a nice bit of polish. It's the little things sometimes, isn't it? Okay, let's shift gears to something that's always top of mind, privacy and security. What's the story in Android 16?
This is definitely a major focus area for user trust and developer compliance, too. Android 16 is really tightening the screws on data access policies. For developers, this means a stricter need to use the right permission manager APIs when asking for sensitive data, and maybe even more importantly, providing clear user-facing reasons why your app needs that data. Plus, on the Play Store side, developers will have to submit updated, detailed privacy declarations, spelling out exactly what data their app collects and how it's used.
So more transparency, more accountability needed from the app makers.
Exactly. And tied into that is the continued rollout of the Privacy Sandbox on Android. This is a big multi-year thing. In Android 16, it's really focused on limiting how individual users can be tracked across different apps while still trying to support the data needed for relevant advertising. The technical approach involves processing certain data right there on the device using anonymization techniques instead of just sending raw user data off to servers for tracking. The goal is finding that balance, privacy-preserving ways to support the digital ad ecosystem.
Right, that tricky balance between user privacy and the business models a lot of apps depend on. Are there other security improvements worth noting?
Yes, a couple. The sources mention enhanced protection against intent redirection attacks. That's a vulnerability where a bad app could potentially hijack a legitimate app's action. Android 16 adds stronger safeguards there. There's also better control over app-owned shared media in the system photo picker, giving you more precise control over which photos or videos an app can access, even if you shared them with that app before.
Okay, so privacy, security, transparency clearly reinforced. Let's talk performance and efficiency. Because even with cool features, a slow or battery-hogging phone is just bad.
Couldn't agree more. Android 16 brings in several optimizations and really doubles down on best practices. They're continuing to push developers towards efficient background task management using tools like Job Scheduler. And the system is getting stricter with job scheduler quotas, basically setting tighter limits on how much background work an app can do to save battery. Developers really need to schedule tasks correctly, or they might just not run reliably.
So if your app does stuff in the background, you really need to play by the job scheduler rules now or risk things breaking.
Precisely. Ignore those rules, and your background tasks might just stop, which could break your app's functionality. They also recommend building lightweight UIs using modern toolkits like Jetpack Compose. That helps with rendering performance and uses less memory.
And how can developers actually track if they're meeting these performance goals on the new OS? Is there a tool for that?
Yeah, Google's main recommendation is using Android Vitals in the Play console. This gives developers aggregated, anonymized data from real users' crashes, ANRs, those app not responding freezes, battery drain, slow startup times. Android 16 adds more detailed reporting here. Now, here's a deeper technical change, but it has potentially big performance implications. Android 16 introduces support for 16 KB page sizes.
Okay, page sizes. Break that down for us.
Sure. Think of memory RAM in your phone as being divided into small blocks, or pages. Traditionally, Android used 4 KB pages. By allowing the system and apps to use larger 16 KB pages, the system can potentially load and process data more efficiently, kind of in bigger chunks.
And the practical benefit of doing that is?
The goal, according to the sources, is faster operations that involve reading or writing lots of data quickly. Things like app launches, the whole system booting up, and importantly, camera startup times. It can reduce system overhead. It's quite a fundamental change to memory management. For developers, there's a compatibility mode at first, but adapting apps to really leverage 16 KB pages could yield noticeable performance gains, especially in those startup-sensitive areas. They've also made significant Art internal changes. Art is the Android runtime, the engine that runs your app's code. Performance tweaks there too. But the key message for developers is a strong warning. Don't rely on non-SDK internal structures within RT. Basically, don't use hidden, undocumented bits of the engine because those can change in Android 16 and break your app. Stick to the official APIs.
That 16 KB page size change. Wow, that sounds like a really foundational shift. Could potentially make the whole system feel snappier. What about some more unique, maybe even surprising features? Anything for the power users out there?
There's one that definitely falls into the surprising, maybe even nerdy cool category, an expanded Linux terminal feature. Building on the previous virtualization work, Android 16 lets users run full GNU applications within a secure virtual machine right on their device.
Wait, hold on. A full Linux environment on my phone, like with a command line and everything.
Exactly. It uses the Android Virtualization Framework, or AVF, for strong isolation, creates a sandbox Debian-based Linux distro running alongside Android. The sources even mention running classic software. You know the old joke about running Doom on everything? Well, now you might actually be able to run it on your phone via Linux terminal, powered by AVS.
Running Doom on your phone via Linux. That's the kind of wonderfully quirky tech feat that just makes me smile. It really shows the potential of this virtualization framework.
Yeah.
But it's not just a toy, right? What's the real potential use case there?
Oh, definitely not just a toy. The real potential is running powerful command line tools, maybe even graphical Linux apps, in a secure, isolated way that doesn't mess with your main Android system. Think developer tools, networking utilities, specialized software only available on Linux. It really starts to blur the lines between mobile and traditional computing in a pretty fascinating way.
That's a definite aha moment for what our phones are becoming capable of.
Ah.
Okay, shifting gears a bit to media and connectivity, huge parts of the mobile experience.
Absolutely. The embedded photo picker gets a significant upgrade. It now seamlessly integrates with cloud services like Google Photos, so you can browse and select photos from your cloud library directly within any app using the picker, without having to jump between apps. Huge convenience. It also includes search across both local and cloud storage.
That sounds incredibly useful. No more downloading photos just to share them somewhere else. What
Nice.
about audio?
There's a cool new audio sharing feature. It uses Bluetooth LE Audio's Auracast technology. If you have compatible Bluetooth headphones or speakers, you can now stream audio from your device to multiple devices at the same time. Imagine watching a movie on a tablet with a friend, and you're both listening wirelessly on your own earbuds.
Oh, that is genuinely useful for sharing media without bothering others. Very cool. And for the video creators, any goodies for them?
Yes, Android 16 adds support for the Advanced Professional Video Codec, or APV. This isn't for your everyday selfie video, though. It's designed for high-quality recording and post-production. Supports things like 10-bit color, higher byte rates, stuff crucial for professional editing and color grading. A big win for mobile videographers.
It sounds like they're polishing the media engine across the board.
Okay, Android updates also often include features aimed at accessibility or just making things less irritating. What's new there? One feature I think many users will really appreciate is notification cooldown. You know, when an app just goes crazy, sending a rapid burst of notifications, this feature will temporarily lower the sound, minimize the visual alerts for those bursts, typically for about 2 minutes, just to give you a break. It's smart enough to prioritize urgent things like calls, so you won't miss those, but for the flood of less critical stuff, it just calms it down.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah.
My sanity might actually thank Google for that one. What about specific accessibility features?
They've enhanced support for Auracast broadcast audio, specifically mentioning compatibility with hearing aids that support the standard. Makes it easier for users with hearing loss to tune into public Auracast streams, like in airports or venues. There's also a new outline text feature. It draws a clear outline around text to improve legibility, replacing the older high-contrast text option, which could sometimes look a bit jarring. This aims for better readability against busy backgrounds, but maybe more aesthetically pleasing.
Those seem like solid steps towards a more usable system for everyone. Okay, let's pivot now more directly to the developers listening. If you're building Android apps, what are the absolutely critical takeaways from Android 16? What do you need to know?
Right. This release really reinforces the direction Android development has been heading for a while now. The sources stress heavily the importance of embracing modern architectural patterns like MVVM, Model View Model, and leveraging the Jetpack libraries. These aren't just suggestions anymore. They're practically necessary for building scalable, testable, maintainable apps that can handle modern Android complexity, especially the adaptability requirements in this release.
And Kotlin is still the way to go, language-wise.
Absolutely. Kotlin is the preferred language, no question. They specifically highlighted updates to Kotlin Multi-Platform Mobile, KMM. Makes it even easier for developers to share business logic code between their Android and iOS apps. That's a huge efficiency win if you're working cross-platform. Beyond the code itself, the sources really emphasize best practices in the whole development lifecycle. Things like strategic planning, starting with an MVP, a minimum viable product, to get feedback early, using agile methodology for iterative development, and critically, using user analytics tools like Firebase to actually understand how people are using your app and let that guide your decisions.
So it's not just about writing the code, but how you build and manage the whole project. And once it's built, getting updates out smoothly.
Exactly. That leads straight into the push for continuous deployment. Setting up robust CI/CD pipelines, continuous integration, continuous deployment, using tools like GitHub Actions for automated builds and testing, Firebase app distribution for getting test builds out quickly. It's becoming essential. Android 16's potentially faster release cadence and the need to adapt make this even more crucial.
Automation seems key there. And speaking of automation, testing is often a huge bottleneck, right?
It really is. Which is why automated testing is featured so heavily. Moving beyond just basic unit tests to more complex UI and integration tests. They mention leveraging AI-driven tools like Test.ai for automated UI testing, and services like BrowserStack for testing across a massive range of virtual and real devices. You have to ensure those adaptive layouts and new features work everywhere. Now, here's a critical change for developers regarding the SDK itself in Android 16. It's a bit different this year. Unlike previous years with just one main target SDK release, Android 16 has two main SDK releases planned. The first one, with the June 2025 platform launch, targets API level 36. This includes most of the significant behavior changes that can impact apps, along with new APIs. Then, a second SDK release is planned for Q4 2025. It will still target API 36, but will primarily add more APIs, features, optimizations, and bug fixes. And remember that Q3 update we mentioned. That brings some of the material expressive visual stuff too.
Okay, so developers need to track this. The API surface might expand significantly later in the year, even after the initial June release. What about the most impactful behavior changes developers absolutely need to prep for? Especially regarding different screen sizes you mentioned, that was a focus.
This is arguably the headline change for app compatibility and architecture in Android 16. Big one. Android is essentially removing the ability for apps to prevent screen orientation changes or force a fixed, non-resizable window size, specifically on large screens.
Removing control over orientation and size. That sounds pretty dramatic.
It is. On devices with the smallest width of 600 dp or more so, think tablets, foldables opened up, Chromebooks running Android apps, Android 16 will largely just ignore an app's manifest settings trying to force portrait only or prevent resizing. Now, for apps targeting API 36, there's a temporary compatibility opt-out flag you can use, a little grace period, but crucially, for apps targeting API 37, likely the next Android version that opt-out is gone. The system will force your app to be resizable and handle orientation changes on large screens, period.
So the core message here is, it's not just a recommendation anymore. Android 16 is effectively mandating adaptive design on large screens, and developers have a limited time to get on board.
That's exactly it. If your app relies on a fixed portrait layout or a non-resizable window on a tablet, it will be broken or forced into potentially awkward layouts on Android 16 devices with large screens if you don't adapt. You must build UIs that fluidly adjust. Google does provide compatibility toggle settings developers can flip to test this behavior on existing apps before they even target API 36, which is helpful.
Wow, that's a massive push towards a truly responsive Android ecosystem. Finally treating tablets and foldables like first-class citizens, really. What about those live updates notifications you mentioned earlier? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a nice user-facing feature with a clear path for developers. Android 16 introduces live updates via a new progress-style notification template. It's designed specifically for ongoing activities, think tracking a food delivery, a ride share, maybe a workout timer. It gives apps a standardized, rich notification UI with things like custom icons, progress segments, milestone markers, lets them show real-time status updates right in the notification shade in a consistent way. Much better than getting like 5 separate notifications for one delivery. There are other developer goodies too, like new capabilities for custom visual effects using AGSL, the Android graphic shading language, allows more complex, performant graphic stuff, and built-in support for vertical text rendering, which is important for languages like traditional Chinese or Japanese.
AGSL sounds like it could open up some really interesting creative possibilities for app interfaces. So, given all these changes, it sounds like a lot. How should an Android developer actually approach getting their app ready for Android 16? It feels like a process.
It absolutely is a process, yeah. A multi-phase one, the sources lay it out pretty clearly. Phase one is all about ensuring compatibility with the new platform without changing your app's target API level yet. So you install Android 16 on a test device or emulator, run your existing app, which is still targeting, say, API 35 or whatever, and see what happens.
And what are you looking for in this compatibility phase? What kinds of things might break just from the OS update itself?
You're looking for behavior changes that affect all apps running on Android 16, regardless of what API they target. This includes things like those stricter job scheduler quotas, check if your background tasks suddenly stop working reliably. Changes to how certain broadcasts are handled, impacts from the art internal changes, if maybe your app was using some non-SDK reflection or internal hacks, those might crash now. The enhanced security against intent redirection attacks could uncover existing vulnerabilities in how your app handles intents. The switch to 16 KB page size mode might reveal memory issues in native code. Even updates to accessibility features could change how services perceive your UI. And changes to Bluetooth handling. The goal is to find these breakage points, fix them in your app while still targeting the old API level, and get that compatibility update out to your users before they get the Android 16 OS update.
Okay, so step one, make sure your current app doesn't break when the user just upgrades their phone. That makes sense. What's phase two?
Phase 2 is targeting Android 16. This is when you actually update your app's target SDK version in your build files to 36 for the initial June release. Once you do that, you effectively opt in to a whole new set of behavior changes. These only apply to apps specifically built for and targeting Android 16.
And those targeted changes are the ones that require you to really adapt your code more fundamentally, right?
Exactly. These include things like the default edge-to-edge display behavior changing you need to handle screen insets properly, the full implementation of predictive back gestures and how that impacts your app's backstack, and critically, those large screen restrictions we talked about where the system ignores your orientation and resizability flags. When you target API 36, you must handle being resizable and orientation changes on large screens unless you use that temporary opt-out, which remember is gone in API 37. This phase is also where you start integrating the new APIs from Android 16 using the live updates template, the enhanced photo picker, maybe those AGSL effects. Again, using the compatibility toggles before you change your target SDK is super helpful for testing how your app would behave.
That two-phase approach makes a lot of sense. First, ensure it doesn't break on the new OS. Then, update it to target the new OS and make it shine, leverage the new stuff. Okay, zooming back out then. Pulling all these pieces together from Baklava and Material U down to 16 KRB pages and mandatory adaptability. What's the ultimate takeaway from Android 16? What does it all mean for our listener, whether they're just using the device or actually building for it?
Yeah, I think for you, the use Android 16 is fundamentally a release focused on refinement and robustness, making the platform you use every day more secure, more private, more efficient, and significantly more consistent and polished across all the different kinds of Android devices out there, especially those tablets and foldables. You should get smoother interactions, better privacy controls, maybe less annoying notifications thanks to cooldown, and cool new features like easier photo access or even that Linux terminal if you're adventurous. For developers, well, it's a release that really demands adaptation. You must build for privacy by default now. You must build UIs that are truly adaptive, especially for large screens. That's not optional anymore. But in return, you get more powerful tools, better performance potential under the hood, and standardized ways to build richer, more integrated experiences. It's definitely a challenge, but it's also an opportunity to build really modern Android apps.
We've certainly covered a lot of ground on Android 16 today. Everything from its Baklava codename origins tied to those internal projects, all the way down to the nitty-gritty of 16 KB memory pages and that crucial two-phase developer approach.
Yeah, we've seen how it builds on Android's core pillars, security, privacy, performance, while pushing forward in user experience with Material U 4.0 and the coming expressive update. Plus, enhancing media with Auracast and APV, and adding really unique stuff like that expanded Linux terminal.
The message for developers seems crystal clear. Embrace the modern patterns, pay super close attention to the behavior changes, especially around privacy and large screens, and leverage those new APIs. For users, it really promises a more secure, smoother, and hopefully just a consistently better experience no matter what kind of Android device you have.
You know, this raises an interesting question, thinking longer term. As we see features like a built-in Linux terminal and this mandatory adaptation to large, flexible screens becoming standard, and as devices themselves keep blurring the lines between phones, tablets, foldables, even laptops, how much longer can we really draw a sharp line between a mobile OS experience and a desktop one? It feels like Android, and maybe others too, are actively working to smudge that line. Definitely something to ponder as you use your devices going forward.